So one disgusting thing that I've noticed since the Marjorie Stoneman students have actually been speaking out on gun control is the attacks on those students. For example, you had Alex Jones and other right-wing personalities attacking David Hogg, calling him a crisis actor and saying, "Oh, he wasn't actually there. He didn't actually survive this because it was all fake. Because it was a false flag to go and take our guns." Well, now we have another example of that. It involves Emma González. Now, during Saturday's March for Our Lives, Gonzales stood on the stage in silence and marked 6 minutes and 20 seconds that it took for the gunman at Marjorie Stoneman to shoot and kill 17 people. Now, right-wingers seized upon a picture of her wearing a jacket which included a Cuban flag. Oh my God, no. A Cuban flag. You know where this is going. That flag, that represented Gonzalez's Cuban heritage, became the subject of attacks from some conservatives online over the weekend. And on Sunday afternoon, one of those messages appeared on the Facebook page for Congressman Steve King. Yes, Steve King. Of course, he said, or his campaign, I should say, wrote, "This is how you look when you claim Cuban heritage, yet don't speak Spanish and ignore the fact that your ancestors fled the island when the dictatorship turned Cuba into a prison camp after removing all weapons from its citizens, hence their right to self-defense." Now, that post included a photo of Gonzales. So, okay, look, there's a lot wrong with that. For one, you're attacking somebody over nothing. Like, that has nothing to do with the issue being discussed. But see, that's how these people work. It may have not been Steve King that put out this message explicitly, but his staff. But nonetheless, people who hang around Steve King are often going to have that same sort of worldview. So what do? Well, they bring race into it. This had nothing to do with their heritage, but they can't help themselves. Oh, look, it's somebody who's Cuban or somebody who looks different. I'm going to attack them on that difference. That doesn't make any sense. But that's, again, they can't help but bring race into it. That's actually what makes them racist. It's not us that's bringing race into it. It was them that tend to bring race into it. Now, suffice to say, some on that page were not happy about this. One of them said, one of the responses is, "Are you seriously mocking a school shooting survivor for ethnic identity?" This is from Brandon Wolf, a survivor of Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. "When it was my community, where were you? When it was Sandy Hook, Columbine, were you on the sidelines mocking those communities too? Did you question someone identifying as a mother? Did you question whether people like me were crisis actors?" There was another one. Emma stood for 6 minutes and 20 seconds to honor the lives of 17 gone too soon. The least you could do was shut your privileged, ineffective trap for 6 seconds to hear someone else's perspective. Now, again, they don't want to listen to other people's perspective, especially if they're someone from a different heritage. We're going to attack you on because of that heritage, because we actually don't want to talk about the real issue, and that's, of course, common sense gun regulation, right? Now, King's campaign, of course, their team fired back. They said, pointing out the irony of someone wearing the flag of a communist country while simultaneously calling for gun control isn't picking on anyone. It's calling attention to the truth, but we understand that lefties find that offensive. Oh my God. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Cuba, right? So, yes, they do have gun control. Nonetheless, private ownership, there are actually a lot of people that own guns in Cuba. And you can find that out when you actually look it up. So, first of all, the number of privately owned firearms in Cuba is about 220,000. That is both illicit and licit guns. So that's legal and illegal, right? Shotguns, a lot of people own shotguns, mostly. Not many rifles. But following shotguns is handguns, which they have about 12,819. They are ranked at number 76 in a 2007 comparison of the number of privately owned firearms. So, wait, I thought Cuba went and took all your guns. No, they didn't take all the guns. They're actually legal guns. Now, the difference is they don't have an amendment that specifically points out your right to gun ownership. So, look, if Cuba wanted to, they could go and confiscate the guns if they wanted. But they haven't. At least when it comes to most guns. In fact, what they do, or they did have, and this is just pointing out facts. This doesn't mean that I agree with things that Cuba actually does. But authorities in Cuba have had voluntary firearm surrender programs. So, look, they go and they say, okay, look, we'll do a gun buyback, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Now, they also have done seizures, where the government goes in and takes some people's guns. And it is state policy for the government to destroy surplus weapons that are either collected or seized rather than return them to the secondary arms market. So that's what they do, right? So yes, they do have strict gun control measures. They have, of course, registration, where you have to register your gun. Gun dealers have to keep records. Manufacturers have to keep records of how much weapons that they actually produce and things like that. And there's a lot of course, like I said, regulation. And nonetheless, in Cuba, you are actually able to have a gun. You just have to register it and license it with the government, and you can use it for personal defense. Steve King is wrong on the facts, as I've just pointed out. And we'll have a link to the article if you want to read more about Cuba's gun laws. But to say that they came in and they took all the guns, they took them all, that is absolutely false. So, nonetheless, they're going to use that attack on her, of course, because, look, it's a simple attack, and for people who are uninformed, it's actually incredibly effective. Now, King's team continues. This meme in question obviously isn't an attack on her heritage in any way. It merely points out the irony of somebody pushing gun control while wearing the flag of a country that was oppressed by a communist anti-gun regime. As I just pointed out, they're not necessarily anti-gun when there are people who are able to own private firearms, which there are several 100,000 that actually do possess legal firearms. Now, that's not the only attack against Emma González. In fact, there are some pictures here of a certain attack against Gonzales. Let me show you that. That is a picture that has been going around. That is Emma González. What is she ripping? Oh, my God. Is that the Constitution? Oh, dear. Look, she is ripping apart the Constitution because she's going after her gun rights, because she's a secret communist from Cuba. But that's a little bit wrong. Let me show you the real picture. That is the correct picture. She's actually tearing apart a Target. So, again, that's another attack. Even worse, earlier this month, the Republican candidate for Maine State House, Leslie Gibson, describes Gonzales as a skinhead lesbian. What does that have to do with gun control? What does that have to do with what she's actually talking about? Nothing. But when they don't have an argument, they go and do personal character attacks. In fact, here's what she said. There's nothing about this skinhead lesbian that impresses me, and there's nothing that she has to say unless you're frothing at the mouth moonbat. Now, after she tweeted that, she got a lot of backlash, and she later deleted that tweet. And then, look, she was running unopposed for Maine State House, right? As soon as this came out, she got a challenger. And then, of course, she actually got two challengers. And when that happened, she dropped out. Now, for Gonzales, she addresses this in a Harper's Bazaar essay. She wrote that if you had ever felt what it's like to deal with all of this, you would know that we aren't doing this for attention. If these funerals were for your friends, you would know this grief is real, not paid for. We are children who are being expected to act like adults, while the adults are proving themselves to behave like children. Hey man, she's right. Look, yes, she's 18 years old. And a lot of these students are still young. And they should be worried about, for her, what college to get into, right? Finishing up high school. Shouldn't have to worry about getting shot. Shouldn't have to worry about organizing marches in order to save people's lives. To try to pass gun control measures. You shouldn't have to worry about any of that stuff. You should be worried about getting good grades and setting yourself up for a career. But instead, this is the world that we live in now. And now, in addition to all that, she also has to worry about attacks from conservative pro-life or gun rights groups. Pro-Second Amendment groups, which, by the way, she doesn't want to take all your guns. She just wants common sense gun control that's actually in line with many polls in the American people. I mean, the American people overwhelmingly want things like background checks, closing gun control loopholes, things like that, a restriction on high-capacity magazines. You know, simple stuff that we could actually do. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that stand in the way of that, and there's a financial incentive to stand in the way of that. And look, part of what you hear is that, oh, this is all paid for and co-opted by the left and all that stuff. No, it's very clear. And if you see the students and what they've talked about, they've talked to a lot of different politicians, and some of them are like, hey, could you give me an endorsement? You know what they said? Absolutely not. We're not in this for politics. We're just in it to make sure that nobody has to go through this again. And that's the whole point of gun control. This isn't a political issue. It's an issue of saving lives. And so many people, unfortunately, see it from a political standpoint in order to score politics points or whatever. No, this is about saving lives. This is about actually preventing stuff like this from happening again, which is so much better than reacting after the fact, after a mass shooting has happened. But the people that are playing politics are the people like, for example, Steve King. And look, Steve King, we know he's a racist. He always makes racially charged comments. For example, in April last year, he posted a photo of a beer on Twitter, offering a toast to immigration authorities for deporting what they call as a dreamer, what they call as dreamers. These are people who are brought into America with for no choice of their own as children, and they're allowed to stay. They're allowed to go to school. They're allowed to work, pay taxes, but they're not actually citizens. And again, these people, this is the only home that they've known, and they actually want to be part of America. And a lot of them have actually tried to immigrate here the right way, and it's very, very difficult for them to do so because of our immigration system is so messed up. And Steve King looks at that and goes, "Don't care. In fact, I'm in favor of deporting them." Why? It's not because they did things the wrong way or they don't plan to do things the right way. It's because they're brown. They look different. A month earlier, he commended nationalist Dutch politician Geert Wilders with a tweet saying, "We can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies." Well, if they're born in America, they're American babies. They're our babies. They're our children. They're our citizens. They're our people. But he doesn't see it like that. If you're brown, if you're not white, well, then you're not our people. You're someone else that is inhabiting our country, and we would like to kick you out. That's the message here. He says, cultural suicide by demographic transformation must end. Not only that, but in 2012, King compared vetting immigrants to picking out a hunting dog. He said, you want a good bird dog? You want one that's going to be aggressive? Pick the one that's not the one that's over there sleeping in the corner. So now immigrants are dogs to him. It's not us that brings race into it. it's people like him that bring race into it. So that's part of this entire attack against Emma González. And that's just one angle that they're going after for. And look, they're doing it because they're scared. They're doing it because they have no other recourse. They know that they're on the wrong side of history when it comes to this issue. And they're going to throw everything that they can against the wall and hope something sticks. Now, that said, Emma and the rest of the group of kids that are speaking out, that are organizing, that are fighting, they're the bravest people in the world to stand up to the NRA. They're braver than our politicians, to be sure. They're brave, and it's because they have to be, not because they want to be. You think they want to be in this position? No, I don't think that at all. I think they'd rather just be kids. But unfortunately, the circumstances demanded that they had to be something bigger, that they had to stand up, because no one else would. And so, for that, they should have a lot of respect. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.